The golden chandeliers hanging from the ceiling of the grand ballroom were worth more than most people earned in a year. They cast a sparkling, warm light over the room, illuminating the silk gowns, sharp black suits, and the diamonds that adorned almost every neck present. It was the annual charity gala for the city's elite, a place where people went to be seen as much as they went to give money. The air smelled of expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and old money. In the far corner of the room, away from the main dance floor and the clusters of laughing guests, stood a woman named Maya. She was 28 years old, and to anyone glancing her way, she looked like she didn't quite belong. She wore a simple navy blue dress. It was a nice dress, clean and well-fitted, but it wasn't made by a famous Italian designer. There were no sparkling stones around her neck, and the clutch she held in her hand was made of plain leather. She stood near a tall potted plant, sipping a glass of sparkling water, watching the room with calm, dark eyes. Maya wasn't there to network. She was there because her husband, James, had asked her to come. James came from a family that had been wealthy for generations. His mother, Eleanor, had organized the entire event. She had made it very clear that attendance was mandatory for the family. Across the room, the crowd parted slightly as Eleanor made her entrance. She was a woman who commanded attention, not because she was loud, but because she acted like she owned the floor she walked on. She wore a gown of deep red velvet that swept the floor, and a heavy diamond necklace rested perfectly on her collarbone. She was holding court with a group of ladies, all of whom were holding champagne flutes and laughing at a story Eleanor was telling. James stood next to his mother, looking slightly uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He was a handsome man, but he often looked to his mother for approval on how to stand, how to smile, and how to speak. Eleanor spotted James looking toward the corner of the room and followed his gaze. Her eyes landed on Maya, and a small, tight frown appeared on her face before she quickly replaced it with a polite, mask-like smile. She excused herself from the group and walked over, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. James followed her like a shadow. "Maya, darling," Eleanor said, her voice smooth but lacking any real warmth. "You have been hiding in the corner all evening. People won't know we brought you if you don't circulate." Maya looked at her mother-in-law and then at her husband. "I'm fine, Eleanor. I'm just happy to watch. It's a beautiful event." "It is," Eleanor agreed, looking Maya up and down. "Though I do wish you had worn the necklace I lent you. It feels a bit plain over here, doesn't it? We wouldn't want people to think the family can't afford to dress their guests." A waiter passing by with a tray of champagne flutes stumbled slightly. It wasn't a big fall, but the bump was enough to send a splash of golden liquid onto the sleeve of Maya's simple dress. The gasp from Eleanor was louder than the waiter's apology. "Oh, goodness," Eleanor exclaimed, stepping back as if the splash might somehow contaminate her expensive velvet dress. "Be careful." The waiter, a young man who looked terrified, began to dab at Maya's arm with a napkin. "I am so sorry, miss. So sorry." Maya gently stopped his hand with a smile. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's just a dress. It's mostly water anyway. Please don't worry." Eleanor let out a sharp, dismissive sigh. "It is not just the dress, Maya. It is the principle. Clumsiness. Ah! And now you are wet. James, take her to the ladies' room or something. She can't stand there dripping." James looked at the wet spot on his wife's dress, and then at the horrified faces of the guests nearby who had turned to look. He looked annoyed rather than concerned. "Come on, Maya," he said, his voice low. "Let's go get you cleaned up. You're making a scene." Maya looked at her husband. She had hoped he would tell his mother to calm down, or that he would tell the waiter it was an accident, but he didn't. He was looking at his shoes, his face red with embarrassment. He was embarrassed by the wine, but mostly he was embarrassed by her. In a room full of peacocks, she was a pigeon, and he hated that she refused to put on feathers. "I'll be fine," Maya said, standing her ground. "I can clean it myself." She didn't wait for James to reply. She turned and walked toward the restrooms, leaving Eleanor and James behind. She could hear Eleanor's voice trailing after her. "She tries so hard to be humble," Eleanor was saying to a nearby acquaintance, her voice loud enough to carry. "It's adorable, really. She doesn't understand that in our world, appearance is everything. We can't all just wear sacks, Maya walked into the long marble hallway that led to the restrooms. The noise of the party faded behind her, replaced by the echo of her own footsteps. She stood in front of a large mirror and took a deep breath. She looked at her reflection. The wet spot on her sleeve was dark against the navy fabric. It would dry. It wasn't a big deal. She turned on the faucet and let the cold water run over her hands. She thought about the comments Eleanor made. This wasn't the first time, of course. It happened at every dinner, every holiday, every brunch. To them, Maya was a puzzle that didn't fit. She worked part-time at a small bookstore. She drove a used car. And she lived in a modest apartment she had kept even after marrying James. They assumed she was poor. They assumed she was lucky to have been picked up by James. They didn't know that Maya liked her life. They didn't know that she found their obsession with labels and status exhausting. But mostly, they didn't know who she really was. Maya dried her hands with a paper towel. Just as she was about to head back out to the party, she heard voices coming from the hallway. Two women were walking toward the mirror area, deep in conversation. Maya recognized one of the voices. It was Eleanor. She quickly stepped into one of the stalls, closing the door quietly. She didn't want to eavesdrop, but they were standing right outside. That girl is going to be the death of me, Eleanor's voice came, sharp and clear. I told James not to marry someone with no background. No family name, no money, no connections. It's social suicide. Oh, come on, Eleanor, a friend's voice replied. She's harmless. She's a bit quiet is all. Harmless. Eleanor let out a dry laugh. She's a leech, Diane. That's what she is. She latched onto James because he has a trust fund. Did you see her dress? I offered to buy her a new one, a real one, and she refused. She wears those cheap clothes on purpose to make us look materialistic. It's passive-aggressive. You think she's after the money? I know she is, Eleanor said confidently. Why else would she stay? James is handsome, but he's not a catch unless you look at the bank account. She's probably saving up every penny James gives her. She's probably hiding a bank account somewhere, waiting for the divorce settlement. I've warned him. He needs to be careful. She contributes nothing. Absolutely nothing. She is a zero. The women checked their makeup in the mirror for a moment longer before the sound of their heels faded away down the hall. Maya stood in the stall, her hand resting on the door latch. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel like crying. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. Eleanor thought she was a zero. Eleanor thought she was a leech living off scraps. Maya looked down at her phone, which was buzzing in her pocket with a notification. She pulled it out and saw a message from her private banker. It was a routine monthly update. She didn't open the full details. She saw the number at the top of the screen. It was a number that would make Eleanor's heart stop. It was a number that was 10 times the size of James's entire family fortune. Maya put the phone back in her pocket. She had never told James the full extent of her inheritance. When her grandfather, a tech genius who shunned the spotlight, passed away, he left everything to her. She had grown up living simply with him, and she never felt the need to flash the money. She married James because she loved him, or at least, she thought she loved the man he could be. When his mother wasn't around, she listened to the silence of the bathroom for a moment. She realized now that James would never be that man. He stood by and let his mother call her a zero. He was embarrassed by a splash of champagne. He valued the velvet red dress more than the person standing next to him. Maya unlocked the stall door and walked out. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The stain on her dress was still there, a dark mark against the blue. Zero, she whispered to herself, a small smile touching her lips. She fixed her hair and straightened her posture. She wasn't going to go back out there and beg for their acceptance. She wasn't going to try to fit into their world anymore. Eleanor wanted to know what Maya was hiding. She wanted to know if Maya had a plan. Maya walked toward the door, the heels of her sensible shoes clicking softly on the floor. She had a plan, all right. She was going to finish this drink, say goodbye to her husband, and then she was going to show them exactly what a zero looks like when she decides to stop playing nice. She pushed the door open and walked back into the party. the noise washing over her like a wave. This time, she didn't head for the corner. She walked straight toward the center of the room. The Sunday sun was shining brightly over the golf course, reflecting off the perfectly manicured grass and the expensive windshields of the luxury cars parked outside the clubhouse. It was the kind of day that felt like a picture postcard. But inside the private dining room of the country club, the atmosphere was thick with tension. It was the weekly family brunch, a ritual that was supposed to be about bonding but usually felt more like a performance review. Maya sat at the long mahogany table, picking at a piece of toast. She was wearing a simple white blouse and a beige skirt. It was clean and pressed, but compared to the others at the table, she looked underdressed. On her left sat James's sister-in-law, Chloe, who was wearing a pair of sunglasses large enough to cover half her face, even though they were indoors. Chloe was loudly recounting a story about a trip to Milan, waving her hand so that the massive diamond watch on her wrist caught the light with every gesture. "And the shopping there," Chloe was saying, her voice high and pitched to carry across the room. "It is just on another level. James, you simply must take Maya there. Though I suppose you'd have to buy her an entire new wardrobe just to get her in the door." The table erupted in polite laughter. It was that specific kind of laughter that rich people use when they are making fun of someone but pretending to be joking. Maya didn't laugh. She just took a sip of her coffee and looked at James. James was sitting at the head of the table, or rather, near the head, with his mother, Eleanor, at the very top. James was cutting into a large omelet, looking down at his plate. He heard the comment. He knew it was mean, but he didn't say anything. He just chewed his food a little faster. Eleanor sat with perfect posture, her eyes scanning the table like a hawk. She caught Maya's eye and smiled a thin, tight smile. "Chloe is only teasing Maya," Eleanor said, her voice cool. "But she does have a point. Appearance matters in our circle. People judge us by the company we keep and, well, by what that company is wearing. It reflects on James's business, you know? If his wife looks like she doesn't care, people think he doesn't care." Maya placed her coffee cup down gently. "I dress comfortably, Eleanor. I like my clothes, and I think James's work speaks for itself." "Well, it speaks louder if you wear silk, darling." Eleanor shot back instantly. James finally looked up. He looked tired. "Mom, please," he said weakly. "Can we just eat?" "It's Sunday. I'm just trying to help," Eleanor said, feigning innocence. She's 28. It's time to stop dressing like a college student. "But I suppose if you don't have the budget for Milan, you have to make do. Maybe if you saved a little harder from that little bookstore job of yours, you could buy something nice." Maya looked around the table. Chloe was smirking. James's brother was looking at his phone. The servants were hovering in the corners, trying to be invisible. It was suffocating. They weren't just talking about clothes. They were telling her that she wasn't good enough. They were telling her that her value was tied to a price tag. "I save quite a bit, actually," Maya said, her voice quiet but steady. "I just believe in investing in things that last. Trends fade." This caused a bit of a silence. Chloe let out a snort. "Investing? Like what? A library card?" "No. Like property. Stocks. Businesses." Maya replied calmly. The table went quiet for a second, and then they all laughed. It was a louder laugh this time, as if she had told a hilarious joke. Eleanor laughed the hardest, touching her pearls. "Oh, Maya, you are a delight. You and your little savings account. That's cute, really. It's good to have hobbies." James felt his face get hot. He didn't like when they laughed at her like that, but he hated that she made it so easy for them. He wished she would just buy the handbag, wear the dress, and blend in. Why did she always have to be so stubborn? Why did she have to be so simple? "Maya," James said, his voice sharper than he intended, "just drop it. It's a nice day. Let's not talk about your finances." Maya turned and looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the embarrassment in his eyes. She saw that he wasn't annoyed at them for laughing. He was annoyed at her for being the target of the laughter. He wanted her to stop rocking the boat, even if the boat was rocking over her. "I'm not the one talking about my finances, James," she said softly. "They are." "Whatever," James mumbled. going back to his food. "Mom, pass the salt." The conversation moved on, but the feeling in the pit of Maya's stomach didn't go away. They started talking about a new car James's brother had just bought, a sports car that cost more than most people earned in a decade. They talked about the renovations on their vacation homes in the Hamptons. It was a constant stream of numbers, all of them high, all of them meant to impress. Maya sat there and realized that she didn't want a slice of this life. She didn't want the sports car that was too low to the ground. She didn't want the house in the Hamptons that required a staff of 10 to clean. She just wanted to be respected. She wanted her husband to look at her the way he looked at that car, with pride, not with a wish that she could be upgraded. Later that afternoon, they left the club. The valet brought James's car around, a sleek silver sedan that was perfectly respectable, but not flashy enough to please Eleanor. As they walked to the car, James lagged a step behind, checking his phone. "James," Maya said, stopping near the passenger door. "Did you hear what your mother said?" James sighed, looking up from the screen. "She's always going to say things. Maya, that's who she is. You know that. She called me a leech. She called me a burden," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "And you sat there. You laughed." "I didn't laugh." James defended himself, though his cheeks reddened. "I just didn't want to fight. It's brunch." "Why do you always have to make everything so serious?" "Because respect is serious, James," she said. "They think I'm poor. They think I'm using you. They think I have nothing to offer." "Well, you don't exactly help the image," James snapped, losing his patience. The quiet country air seemed to vibrate with his sudden outburst. "Look at you, Maya. You're stubborn. You refuse to play the game. In this family, you have to play the game. I'm trying to build a career, a life. You just make it harder." Maya stared at him. The wind blew a strand of hair across her face, but she didn't brush it away. "I make it harder? By being your wife. By being there for you? By not being what we need," James said, looking away. "Just get in the car, okay? I'm tired of this." Maya stood there for a moment longer. She looked at the expensive club building behind them, the immaculate gardens, the way the valets bowed and scraped. She looked at James, who was tapping his foot on the pavement. Waiting for her to submit, she realized then that she wasn't just fighting a bad mother-in-law. She was married to a man who didn't see her. He saw a reflection of his own insecurities. He wanted a trophy, and she refused to be polished. "No," Maya said. James froze. "What?" "I said no," she repeated, her voice clear and strong. "I'm not getting in the car. I'm not going home to pretend everything is fine. You can go back to your mother and tell her you won. Tell her she chased me away. But I'm done being the punchline." "Don't be dramatic," James scoffed, unlocking the car door with a beep. "You're walking? Fine. Walk. Maybe it'll clear your head." He got into the driver's seat and slammed the door. He didn't look back to see if she was okay. He didn't wait to see if she changed her mind. He started the engine and pulled away. The tires crunching on the gravel drive, Maya watched the taillights disappear down the road. The silence of the parking lot was peaceful. She took a deep breath of the fresh air. She felt lighter than she had in months. The fear that had been holding her back, the fear of losing him, the fear of being alone was suddenly gone. Because James was right about one thing. She wasn't what they needed, but he was wrong about everything else. She wasn't a leech. She wasn't poor. And she certainly wasn't going to be made to feel small in a parking lot ever again. She turned and began to walk toward the main road. Pulling out her phone as she went, she didn't call a friend. She didn't call a taxi. She swiped through her contacts until she found the name she hadn't called in a long time. Mr. Henderson. The family attorney. It was time to stop playing nice. It was time to show them exactly what they had thrown away. The mood inside the high-rise conference room was heavy. The kind of heavy that feels like a storm cloud is parked directly overhead. It was Tuesday morning, 2 days after the incident at the country club, and the entire family had gathered around a long mahogany table. This wasn't a brunch. This was a crisis meeting. James sat at the head of the table looking like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Next to him sat his father, a man who usually looked like a statue of authority, but now just looked tired and angry. At the other end was Eleanor, trying to maintain her composure, though her lips were pressed into a thin, white line. The only other person in the room was Mr. Sterling, family's longtime lawyer and accountant. The problem was laid out in black and white. On the papers scattered across the table, James had put everything he had into a new luxury real estate development project that was supposed to be his masterpiece. The thing that would finally prove he was more than just Eleanor's son. But the market had turned. Construction costs had skyrocketed. Investors were getting nervous. Now the bank was calling in the loans, and the family didn't have enough liquid cash to cover the gap. "How much?" James asked, his voice cracking slightly. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses and looked down at his notes. "To stop the foreclosure and keep the project alive for another 6 months, we need $2 million. Immediately." "$2 million," James's father repeated, rubbing his temples. "You know, we don't have that kind of cash lying around right now. James, the trust funds are tied up in stocks, and the market is down. We can't sell without taking a massive loss." James slumped back in his chair. He felt like he was drowning. He had been so sure this would work. He had listened to his friends, his advisors, and his ego. And now the whole thing was crumbling. "What about the house?" James asked, sounding desperate. "Can we mortgage the main estate?" Eleanor let out a sharp gasp. "Absolutely not. That house has been in the family for 3 generations. We are not turning it into an ATM because you made a bad investment. Well, we have to do something." James shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I'm going to lose everything. The company, the reputation, everything." The room fell into a tense silence. The air conditioner hummed quietly, the only sound in the room, as they all stared at the table. They were trapped. They were rich in assets, but poor in cash. It was a common problem for people who lived the way they did, spending everything they had to look like they had even more. Then, the door to the conference room opened. Maya walked in. She wasn't wearing the navy dress or the simple skirt she usually wore. She was dressed in smart, tailored trousers and a crisp blazer. She looked calm, professional, and completely detached from the panic that was suffocating the room. She held a leather folder in one hand. James looked up, his eyes widening. He hadn't spoken to her since she walked away from the country club. He had dozens of missed calls and texts from her that he had ignored, too angry and too scared to face her. "What are you doing here?" James asked, his voice cold. Maya didn't look at him. She looked at Mr. Sterling. "I believe I am still listed as your wife, James. And considering that my name is on the mortgage for our apartment and I am a legal resident of this state, I think I have a right to know when my financial future is being discussed." "She's right," Mr. Sterling said quietly, not wanting to make a scene. "Mrs. Maya is legally entitled to be here." Eleanor rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. "This is a private business matter, Maya. This is about serious money, not about your little savings account." Maya walked over to the table but didn't sit down. She stood at the foot of the table, looking at each of them in turn. She saw the fear in James's eyes. She saw the disdain in Eleanor's. She saw the resignation in her father-in-law's eyes. "I heard what you need," Maya said, her voice steady. $2 million, as James snapped. "And unless you've been hiding a lottery win in your bookstore job, there isn't much you can do to help. So please, just go. You know, James," Maya said softly, "I have tried to help you. I have tried to tell you that you were overextending yourself. I tried to tell you that borrowing more money to pay off old debt is a trap, but you wouldn't listen to me. You said I didn't understand how the world works, 'cause you don't," James yelled, standing up. He was sweating now. "You think clipping coupons and saving 5% of a paycheck is smart? That's cute for normal people, Maya, but we play in the big leagues. We need big solutions. You need liquidity," Maya corrected him. "And you have no idea what I have or haven't saved, because you never asked." Eleanor laughed, a dry, mocking sound. "Oh, here we go. The secret savings lecture. Let me guess, Maya. You have $10,000 put away? Maybe 20. That might buy us a nice lunch, darling, but it won't save James's company. It's not 10,000, Maya said. James looked at her. For a second, a flicker of confusion crossed his face. What? I said. It's not 10,000, she repeated. I have assets. Liquid assets. Enough to cover this. The room went dead silent. Mr. Sterling stopped shuffling his papers. Eleanor stopped smirking. Don't lie to me, Maya, James said, his voice dropping to a whisper. That's not funny? I'm not laughing, Maya said. I never told you about my family. Not really. You assumed I was an orphan with nothing because I lived simply. You assumed I was a charity case. James's father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What are you saying, girl? Maya placed the leather folder on the table. She didn't open it. She just rested her hand on it. I am saying that I can write a check for $2 million right now, today, and the bank won't bounce it. It's impossible, Eleanor breathed, her face turning pale. Where would you get that kind of money? It doesn't matter where it came from, Maya said. What matters is that I can save your project, James. I can save your reputation. James stared at her like she was a stranger. He looked at the folder, then at her face. He was trying to find the punchline. He was trying to find the catch. The woman he had looked down on for years, the woman whose clothes he mocked, the woman he left at the country club like she was nothing. She was offering him a lifeline, and he hated it. Is this a trick? James asked, his voice trembling. Are you trying to humiliate me? Maya looked at him with a mixture of sadness and pity. I'm trying to help you. But I have conditions. Conditions. Eleanor shrieked, standing up. You don't get to make conditions. You are a guest in this family. If you have money, which I doubt, it is your duty as a wife to help your husband. I am not a guest, Eleanor, Maya said, her voice hardening. And I am done doing my duty while being treated like trash. She looked back at James. I will give you the $2 million. I will clear the debt with the bank. James let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a month. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maya. I knew you'd come through. We can talk about the details later. No, Maya said. We talk about them now. She opened the folder and took out a single sheet of paper. She slid it down the table toward James. It wasn't a check. It was a document. What is this? James asked. It's a settlement agreement, Maya said calmly. James picked up the paper. He read the first line. His eyes scanned down the page. His face went from relief to confusion, and then to pure horror. You're divorcing me? He stammered. Yes, Maya said. I will pay off your debt. I will save your company. But in exchange, you sign this. The divorce is final. The assets are split. My money stays mine, yours stay yours. And I walk away. Can't be serious, James said, his voice rising. You're going to ruin me? You have the money to save me, but only if I destroy my marriage. I'm not destroying it, James. You did that on Sunday, Maya said. I'm just making sure I never have to clean up a mess of yours again. You greedy little Eleanor started to scream, but Maya held up a hand. Stop, Maya commanded. The authority in her voice was so strong that Eleanor actually stopped talking, her mouth hanging open. Sign the paper, James, Maya said. Take the money. Save your legacy. Or refuse it and watch the bank take it all away on Friday. The choice is yours. James looked at the paper. He looked at his mother, who was shaking her head furiously. He looked at his father, who was looking at Maya with a strange new look of respect. And then he looked at Maya. He realized that he didn't own her. He never had. And now, she was buying her freedom from him. He looked down at the numbers on the debt statement. $2 million. It was everything. And she had it. All along, she had it, sitting in a simple bank account while he laughed at her cheap clothes. His hand shook as he picked up the pen. He hated her in that moment. He hated her power. But he loved his survival more. He scratched his signature on the bottom of the page. A smart choice, Maya said quietly. She took the paper, slid it back into her folder, and turned to walk out of the room. Wait. James called out. The money? When do we get it? Maya stopped at the door. She didn't turn around. Mr. Sterling has my number. He'll have the wire transfer within the hour. She opened the door and walked out, leaving the family alone with their saved fortune and their shattered pride. The silence in the conference room after Maya left was the kind that rings in your ears. It was heavy, thick, and suffocating. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning struggling to cool the sudden chill in the room. James sat slumped in his chair, staring at the mahogany table where the divorce settlement papers lay. He had just signed away his wife to save his company, but the victory felt like ash in his mouth. Eleanor was the first to move. She stood up. Her face flushed a deep, unnatural red. She marched over to the spot where Maya had been standing, as if she could scold the empty air. "This is a joke," she spat, her voice shaking. "It has to be. She is bluffing. She is trying to scare us." James slowly looked up at his mother. His eyes were empty. "She wasn't bluffing, Mom. Mr. Sterling verified her." Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, was frantically typing on his laptop. He looked pale. I just received a notification on the secure portal, James. It's a preliminary holding instruction. The funds are being moved from a private trust in the Cayman Islands. The amount is, well, it's significantly more than the $2 million we needed." "How much more?" James's father asked, his voice gravelly. "Enough to clear the entire debt on the development project," Sterling said, adjusting his glasses nervously. "With enough left over to finish the construction without borrowing another dime." Eleanor stopped pacing. She looked at the lawyer, then back at her son. "A trust in the Cayman Islands, Maya? The girl who buys her shoes at the discount store? That's impossible." "She said she had assets," James whispered. "I thought she meant a savings account." She lied to us." Eleanor shrieked. "She let us treat her like a servant for 2 years while she was sitting on a fortune. Who does that? What kind of person hides that kind of money?" "The kind of person who has respect for herself," James's father said quietly. He hadn't looked up from his hands, but his voice cut through Eleanor's ranting. "The kind of person who didn't want us to love her for her bank account." Eleanor stared at her husband, mouth open. "Are you taking her side? She humiliated us." "We humiliated ourselves, Eleanor," the old man said, standing up slowly. He looked tired, older than he had an hour ago. "She offered to help. James told her to leave her checkbook at home. We all laughed at her. We made our bed, and now we have to lie in it." James pushed himself away from the table. He felt sick to his stomach. He realized that Maya hadn't just been hiding money. She had been hiding herself. She had been trying to live a normal life, and he had punished her for it because she didn't fit into his plastic world. He thought of the times he had made fun of her car, her clothes, her job. Every time he had tried to fix her, he was actually trying to break her spirit. "She bought her freedom," James said, his voice hollow. "She literally paid us to go away." "Take it back," Eleanor said suddenly, grabbing James's arm. "Call her. Tell her we reject the money. Tell her we won't divorce." James pulled his arm away gently. "We can't, Mom. The money is gone. It's in the project account. If we try to reverse it now, the bank will foreclose by Friday. We need this." He looked at Mr. Sterling. "Is the project safe?" "Yes," Sterling confirmed. "You are solvent, James. You are actually very rich now." "Well, the company is." James let out a short, bitter laugh. "The company is rich. I'm just a guy who took money from his wife to pay off his gambling debts." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline. The buildings looked like monuments to greed. He had wanted to be one of those monuments. He had wanted to be a king in this city. Now he realized he was just a jester who had been funded by the queen he treated like a peasant. The days that followed were a blur of activity for the family. But a different kind of energy filled the house. The money from Maya had saved them, but the silence in their home was deafening. The staff walked on eggshells. Eleanor stopped hosting her lunch dates. She was too afraid of what people were saying, and people were talking. The truth about the divorce and the miracle investment had started to leak. It's hard to keep a secret when millions of dollars move through a bank system. James tried to go back to work. The office felt different. His partners looked at him with new eyes. Before, they had seen him as the struggling heir, the kid trying to make his dad proud. Now, they saw him as the guy whose wife had bailed him out. It was an emasculating feeling. Every time he signed a check for the construction crew, he wondered if they knew. Every time he made a decision, he wondered if Maya would have made a better one. A week after the meeting, James was sitting in his office when his phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend, someone who ran in the same social circle as his mother. Asterisk, did you see the news? Asterisk, James frowned. Asterisk, what news? Asterisk, asterisk, check the financial wire. Your ex-wife just made the list. Asterisk, James opened his browser and typed in the name of the major financial publication. There, on the front page, was a headline that made his heart stop. Asterisk, asterisk, the silent heiress. Who is the mystery investor behind the tech surge? Asterisk, asterisk. He clicked the link. The article detailed a massive recent acquisition in the technology sector. It talked about a private trust that had been aggressively buying up shares of old tech giants and turning them into profitable companies. It listed the current estimated value of the trust. James scrolled down, his eyes scanning for the name. And there it was, buried in the middle of a paragraph about the trust's origins. The trust was established by the late tech pioneer Arthur Moore, inventor of the OmniLink network, and is currently managed by his sole heir and granddaughter, Maya Moore. James felt the blood drain from his face. He read the number again. It wasn't 2 million. It wasn't 20 million. The article estimated the trust's value at $500 million. $500 million. He dropped the phone on his desk. It made a loud clatter in the quiet office. $500 million. That was what he had looked down on. That was who he had mocked for wearing a $50 dress. She could have bought his father's entire company 10 times over, without even noticing a dent in her bank account. She hadn't just been comfortable. She was one of the wealthiest people in the country. And she had lived in a small apartment, driven a used car, and worked in a bookstore because she wanted to. She had chosen a simple life, and he had punished her for it because he was too shallow to understand that you don't need to show off money to have it. He thought about the day he left her at the country club. You're walking? Fine. Walk, he had said. He had abandoned a billionaire on the side of the road because she didn't wear a diamond necklace. The irony hit him like a physical blow. He had spent his entire life chasing a fortune that he married and then threw away. He wanted the world to think he was a big shot, but he was just a man who couldn't see the diamond even when it was standing right in front of him. He picked up his phone again, his hand trembling. He went to his contacts. He scrolled down to M. He saw her name. He hovered his thumb over the call button. He wanted to beg. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to tell her that he was wrong, that he could change, that he could be the man she deserved if she just gave him a chance. But then he remembered the look in her eyes in the conference room. It wasn't anger. It was finality. She hadn't been acting out of spite. She had been acting out of self-respect. She knew who he was. She knew that if she stayed, he would always resent her for being more powerful than him. Or he would always try to use her to fix his mistakes. She hadn't paid him off to be cruel. She had paid him off to set herself free. James stared at the screen until it went black. He didn't press call. He put the phone down on the desk and looked out the window at the city. He had saved his building. He had saved his company's reputation. But looking at the empty chair on the other side of his desk, he realized he had lost the only thing that actually mattered, and for the first time in his life. James didn't know how to buy his way out of the hole he was in. The grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel was buzzing again. It was the annual Winter Gala, the biggest event of the year for the city's elite. The same orchestra was playing, the same crystal chandeliers were sparkling, and the same people were dressed in their finest evening wear. But the atmosphere was completely different than it had been at the charity gala a few weeks ago. Eleanor stood near the entrance, gripping a glass of champagne so tightly her knuckles were white. She was wearing a stunning gown of silver silk, but she didn't look like a queen holding court tonight. She looked like a soldier waiting for a battle to begin. People were walking past her, nodding politely, but they weren't stopping to chat. The usual cluster of admirers that surrounded her was nowhere to be found. James stood next to her, looking stiff and uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Since the news about Maya had broken, the family's social standing had taken a strange turn. They were still rich, thanks to Maya's money saving their company, but they were no longer respected. The story of how they had treated their secret billionaire daughter-in-law had spread through the community like wildfire. It was the kind of gossip that everyone loved, a modern Cinderella story, where the wicked stepfamily got exactly what they deserved. "Stop fidgeting, James," Eleanor hissed through clenched teeth. "Stand up straight. We have to show them that we are unfazed." "How can we be unfazed, Mother?" James whispered back. "Everyone is looking at us like we're villains." "Don't be ridiculous," Eleanor snapped. "We are victims. She deceived us. She should have told us who she was. It's disrespectful to hide that kind of fortune from your own family." Just then, the double doors at the far end of the room opened. The orchestra seemed to hesitate, and a ripple of movement went through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Maya walked in. She wasn't wearing the simple navy dress or the beige skirt. She was wearing a floor-length gown of emerald green velvet. It was elegant, classic, and undeniably expensive. She wore diamonds around her neck's imple, stunning stones that caught the light with every step. But she didn't look like she was showing off. She looked like she was finally wearing the clothes that matched the person. She was on the inside. She wasn't surrounded by bodyguards or an entourage. She was alone. Eleanor's eyes widened. She straightened her posture, plastering a bright, fake smile on her face. "See?" she whispered to James. "She wants to be part of this world after all." She came back. "Stay here," James said, putting a hand on his mother's arm. "Don't go over there yet." "I'm going to welcome her," Eleanor insisted, smoothing down her dress. "It's the mature thing to do." Eleanor began to march across the room, her heels clicking on the marble floor. James hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding, and then followed her. He felt a strange mix of dread and hope. Maybe she did come back to talk. Maybe she realized that life was lonely without family. Eleanor reached Maya just as Maya was stopping to say hello to an older couple. "Maya, darling," Eleanor exclaimed, opening her arms wide as if they were best friends. "You made it. We are so thrilled you could join us." Maya turned slowly. She looked at Eleanor's outstretched arms and then up at her face. Her expression was calm, almost bored. She didn't step forward to accept the hug. "Hello, Eleanor." Eleanor, realizing the hug wasn't happening, awkwardly lowered her arms and pretended she was just fixing her necklace. "We heard about the wonderful news in the paper. A $500 million fortune. Goodness, you really have been holding out on us. We should have a family celebration to catch up. James was just saying how much he misses our little chats." James caught up to them, standing slightly behind his mother. He looked at Maya. He really looked at her. She didn't look angry. She looked peaceful. It made him feel even worse. "Hi, Maya," James said quietly. "James," she acknowledged him with a nod. Eleanor pressed on, her voice rising slightly as people nearby began to stare. "The club is having a luncheon on Tuesday. We would love to host you. As a guest of honor, of course. To welcome you properly." Maya looked around the room. She saw the eyes watching them. She saw the people whispering behind their fans. She realized that Eleanor wasn't inviting her because she missed her. She was inviting her because she wanted to be seen standing next to the $500 million heiress. She wanted to borrow Maya's status like she borrowed jewelry. "I don't think so, Eleanor," Maya said softly. "Oh, don't be silly," Eleanor laughed, a high, nervous sound. "We are family. We can look past the little misunderstanding. With the divorce, family forgives." Maya took a small step closer. The room went quiet. "Family," she repeated. "Is that what you call it? When you mocked me at the charity gala? When you laughed at my clothes? When you told your friends I was a leech?" Eleanor's smile froze. "We were just teasing, Maya. You know that?" "And when you left me at the country club, James," Maya said, turning her gaze to her ex-husband, "did you love me then?" James opened his mouth, but no words came out. He remembered the feeling of the steering wheel under his hands, the anger he felt because she wouldn't just play the game. I was confused, he stammered. No, Maya said. You were arrogant. You thought that because I didn't flash my money, I didn't have any? You thought your value was in your name, and mine was in how well I could decorate your arm. We can change, James said, his voice cracking. It was desperate. He could feel the slipping away of the life he wanted. Mom and I, we talked. We know we were wrong, just come back to the table. Have dinner with us. Maya looked at the Melanor in her silver dress, trying to cling to relevance, and James in his tuxedo trying to cling to his pride. They looked smaller to her now. They weren't giants who looked down on her. They were just people, sad and insecure, who needed other people's approval to feel good about themselves. I have a table waiting for me, Maya said politely. Who are you sitting with? Eleanor asked, craning her neck to see. Let us come. We'll join you. I'm sitting with the staff, Maya said. Eleanor blinked. The staff? The waiters. I'm sitting with the event planners. The musicians and the servers, Maya said, gesturing toward the back of the room where a few people in plain clothes were sitting at a smaller table laughing and eating. They are the only people in this room who treated me like a human being when I was just the girl in the navy dress. They didn't care what I was wearing. They didn't care who my grandfather was. They were nice to me because they are good people. Eleanor's face twisted in distaste. But that's the help, Maya. You can't sit with them. You're one of us now. No, Eleanor, Maya said, a genuine smile touching her lips. I was always one of them. I was never one of you. She turned her back on them. Don't walk away from me, Eleanor hissed, forgetting to keep her voice down. You owe us. We gave you a life. We gave you James. Maya stopped. She didn't turn around, but her voice carried clearly across the silence of the ballroom. I gave you $2 million, Eleanor. That's more than enough for a lifetime of unkindness. Consider us even. She walked away, her emerald dress swishing gracefully. She didn't head for the VIP tables or the stage. She walked straight to the back of the room. The conductor of the orchestra, a man she had been chatting with earlier, stood up and pulled out a chair for her. A young woman who had served her coffee at the brunch waved at her excitedly. Maya sat down, laughing at something the woman said. Eleanor stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor. The murmuring in the room grew louder. People were pointing. Some were smiling. It wasn't a mean smirk this time. It was a look of admiration. They respected Maya. They didn't respect Eleanor. James looked at his mother. He saw the humiliation etched into her face, but for the first time, he didn't feel like rushing in to fix it. He realized that she had done this to herself. She had built a world out of judgment, and eventually the judgment had turned back on her. Come on, Mom, James said quietly. He took her arm, but it felt heavy, like lifting a stone. We should go back, Eleanor whispered, her eyes glassy. They're staring. Let them stare, James said. There's nothing left to prove here. They walked out of the ballroom, leaving the party behind them. As they stepped into the cold night air to wait for their car, the city lights flickered above them. They were still wealthy. They still had their big houses and their cars. But as James watched his mother shivering in her silver silk gown, he knew the truth. They had spent their lives looking down on the world, thinking they were above it all. But tonight, they had learned the hardest lesson of all. Money can buy you a seat at the table, but it can't make anyone respect you. And sometimes the person you look down on is the only one who could have saved you. Inside. The music started up again, louder and jazzier than before. Somewhere in the back of the room, a woman in a green dress laughed, and for the first time in a long time, she was free.